All right. Yeah, so there's been several different threads that have been going on as far as the possibility of citizen science being helpful in kind of trying to understand the scope of landslide hazards as they across Alaska. And I'm hoping we'll give Gabe doesn't, I don't think he's not ready to give a detailed report on what their plans are, but I'm hoping we'll hear just a little bit of what the future might be as far as so DNR actually owns a citizen science app, and they've been using that for snow observations and stuff, and so they want to extend that to landslides as well. And I've had several conversations with some folks. Not sure if we have anyone on here who's been part of that, but in Seward and in Juneau particularly, about who are avid hikers, interested in the topic, and game to go out and take a look at sites that may have signs of instabilities. Keep their eyes out for other things as well. And so I kind of made this meeting a deadline for myself to just put some materials together to support that kind of activity. So maybe it makes sense. I'd like to just go ahead and show some of that, but maybe before I do, no, Gabe, we'll leave you to the end, because maybe it'll make more sense. Have it right on top of what I'm talking about. I guess the big picture that I see here is it seems like, so I've gone through this process over the last now going on a year, just of looking around, doing a very shallow and simple survey of possible instabilities around the state. And it's been really interesting for me, and I think there's been some useful stuff that I've come across there. And it seems to me, from looking at what's out there, that there's quite a bit of potential to people who are just out for a hike to actually document useful evidence of instabilities. And especially, I'm thinking most of my brain here is on the deep-seated bedrock instabilities, large-scale instabilities that include like tension cracks, scarps in the hill slope. Maybe in some cases, small landslides as an indicator of activity. So not so much what's been going on, and especially there are the prominent cases anyway are down in Southeast Alaska with shallower landslides that are driven, by extreme rain. Not sure that's a topic that's so amenable to this sort of documentation, but because these deep-seated landslides, frequently there is precursory deformation. Frequently they're happening on slopes that actually have some long history of deformation. That's maybe they may not have been active, and may not be active now, but they may not have been active for long periods of time. But then there's some older evidence of deformation. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. And I'm clicking on a few things in the background here to launch. I didn't queue up everything I needed here, but so the way I see this working is that I'd put together, and I'd love to have some help with this. Put together some materials that help explain the basic geology of this. I think it's all pretty simple stuff. Provide some examples, and then that people would go out and do basic field documentation. And at the level I see it, this is a matter of just of taking pictures, geolocated photos preferably, and a few notes. Don't think this is something that needs like a really elaborate methodology or protocol. So I'm going to click just a little bit more. I apparently can't click and talk at the same time. If anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to jump in. All right, I've got everything lined up. So what I've done is just made this document here that has a description of, so it's got like a brief statement of purpose, and it has a bunch of photos that most of these are from Gruink, showing different features that that may be indicative of, or they're certainly indicative of deformation at some point. And they may be indicative of ongoing slope deformation. This photo I didn't actually take. This is Nick Reardon took this picture some years ago, but of a big tension crack. He was up there hiking around looking at things and happened to cross paths with some other hikers, and they provide a very nice scale bar. But it's got background, kind of explains the idea, talks about the way instabilities tend to occupy existing features in the rock, that sort of thing, how instabilities can change over time, what sorts of factors lead to changes that could lead to a failure, and then just describes a few features that you might see in the field. And really, tension cracks and scarps are, I think, mostly what people would be looking for. I included bulges, thinking in terms of the thrusting that happens at the toe of some landslides, just partly from the perspective of trying to be more complete. But I think that what people are mostly looking for are these really simple features. So I grabbed this photo of a nice scarp from the tidal inlet instability in Glacier Bay. Here's Anya inside of a tension crack. Martin on this really kind of unusual crack that's kind of created a drain in a lake, a dry lake bed. Sinkholes are one that I kind of think it's an easy one to miss, so I have some discussion of that. So my hope is that I'll be able to get these out to people, and I've got some people who seem game to go and give this a try, especially in Seward, but also in Juneau. And I didn't go into a bunch of detail on methodology. I just basically said, go take photos and take notes, send them to me, and we'll try to get them organized at that point. And so what I'm hoping this will mean is that we'll iterate some, like we'll get some materials and then realize through that process what we really need that might be a little different than what we initially initially get. And the other piece of this that I'm setting up is, so this is for Seward, is I've actually specified specific areas to look at. One of the ones that I'm most interested in here is there's a little patch on the south side of Lowell Creek. So just a little background on this particular area. This is Seward, downtown Seward. There's this big canyon right behind town that has a creek called Lowell Creek in it. Lowell Creek is diverted through a tunnel that goes through the ridge right about here, a 10-foot diameter tunnel, so that it doesn't flood into the town. There are tension cracks that are pretty well known around on Mount Marathon, which is one of the more famous hiking spots in Alaska, that are up, especially these areas here. Then there are some other features that are potentially of interest. And so the concern here, I mean, if there was a giant landslide, it could be particularly catastrophic because it could actually extend down into the town itself. But maybe a more likely worrisome scenario is a valley damming landslide that then led to an outburst flood. If the tunnel wasn't able to accommodate that flood, then the flood would extend into town. The hospital is right here at the mouth of the gully, so it's sort of unfortunate arrangement as far as vulnerabilities. But they're not, as far as I know, not really well documented. There's some possible tension cracks in this area. The only places I've been able to pick out any GIS data that suggests them is there's one LiDAR survey that just barely, it's like the edge is right here, and it picks out some possible tension cracks in there. There's some satellite photos that sort of have suggestive shadows in them, but it's in the middle of a thick alder patch, so you can't see it very well. But I was talking to a couple of local hikers, and they said, "Oh yeah, I've been up there. There are these, you can like climb down into these caves in the rock." So they had seen something there that sounds a lot like cracks opening up. And this is worrisome because it's almost directly above the tunnel. This image is not a very good one to see it. You can see the river there. I think the tunnel is like right there. So if there was a landslide here, it might directly block that tunnel. So what I'm imagining is that someone in Seward, this is, apparently there's actually a trail here. I guess not surprising given how handy it is from town. They could keep an eye on this. And if this area started showing signs of lengthening of cracks and that sort of thing, then they could say something about that. We might also, better characterize it with that sort of ground data. So I think it's a really important one, and also a really good test case for this sort of approach. I'm imagining I'll take and make, I think I'll probably overlay these polygons on like a USGS map, and so I'll have a like a printable map version of this, and then also provide them as KMLs, GPXs, and such that people can load into whatever their tool of choice is. But all of this, I see this as very much, it's totally an experiment, and so I really was curious to hear reactions people had. Like I'm sure other people, there's got to be other examples of this sort of thing being done to some extent or another. Pitfalls that you guys see. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll just kind of open it up to comments and questions there.
Hey, good morning, Hig. This is Angela. I've always been concerned about this area since the first day I went into Seward because of the location of the hospital being built right there on the old alluvial fan. But I was not aware of some of the detention cracks. One thing just to let you know, and I don't know if it'd be worth reaching out to the Army Corps of Engineers, but I know that they're right now in the process, and they're doing some geotechnical studies to actually have another tunnel constructed to accommodate those flows. And so any information that you have or anybody else can pull together seems like it would be really logical for the construction. If there are some big scalps and they are going to drill or do any kind of blasting, it would probably be good to have that awareness ahead of time. The other thing too, and I have not been to a site, but it's up along Kenai Lake, and our former retired law enforcement officer has seen scarps, or he mentioned one that he'd seen when he was up, I think, hunting or maybe looking for a former camp. And I don't know if it's related to a moraine deposit. I've not actually ever been up there, but it's probably around mile 17, kind of on the hill slope between Ptarmigan Lake and probably Victor Creek. But I haven't gotten more details on that. And I know it has been documented as moraine, I think. I don't know if I've looked for it on Google Earth imagery, but I've not been able to really pull it out.
I don't think I know that site. And I would also say, like, one of the inspirations for all of this is that I've gotten a ton of really useful leads from people who just like, they say, oh, I was out here and I saw this thing. And once I have that lead and I take a look, then it's pretty obvious there's something going on. Actually, most recently from Marcus Mueller is with the Borough, pointed out that there's some what look like big, and I'm pretty sure he's right, big landslides near Kachmak Silo and Vosnesenka and Rozdalna up in the Russian villages at the head of Kachmak Bay. But yeah, I'd love to, Angela, if you're able to, I don't know, put me in touch or just send some more details of what you know about that. I'd be really interested. And I have reached out to the Army Corps, but haven't gotten a response. I only sent one email, so I haven't really pushed that really hard. But I was aware that they are looking at further work in that area. I have had good conversations with a number of people who are locally involved in landslide hazards. So, and there's a UAF grad student, Matthew Ballas. Gabe could
Matthew Balash.
Balash, thank you, who has been working for quite a long time, actually looking at instabilities in this area. If I turn off the imagery here, these little lines are some of his mapping here. So yeah, so there's definitely people looking in this area.
Hey, Gabe, is this that you were thinking in preparation for the app that hopefully Gabe will get money to, or one way or another?
Gabe, do you want to take that as a segue and say what you want to say about where you're going?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said.
Oh, I was thinking about the app, that we talked about when we wrote the COPE proposal, and if we don't get money through there, hopefully you get money from somewhere else to develop that app where people can actually map and learn about these hazards when they're out hiking. So was that kind of like the long-term plan? I could see how what Hig is presenting here would fit really good into that app that you were talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, Hig and I've had some conversation about that. And so we have an app, it's called Mountain Hub. And just last summer, Mountain Hub was donated to us at University of Alaska Fairbanks. It was actually donated to our community snow observations project, and it's hosted at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so we were donated this app by Mammut. And we've been using it for crowdsourced snow depth observations for about 4 years now. And the idea, now that we have it, is to take this small amount of funding that we have through another source to develop the landslide hazard observation tool set for it. And so I've put this work order in the queue, and the developers are evaluating it right now. And the goal is to have an observation type that's associated with landslides. And then within the landslides observation type, there can be a number of different tools that are sort of just preloaded. So it just requires a tap essentially to make a quick description so that somebody, who's a backcountry recreationist or somebody who's going out there specifically for community-based science can make an observation type, take a photo, and then it'll be automatically geolocated and editable by that person. If it's, obviously you're not going to be standing right on the landslide. So we want it to be editable so it can put it in the right spot. And then what that'll do is it'll put it immediately into our database as soon as this person gets into Wi-Fi or cell service. And then we can have that available to the community at large. And then as scientists, any of us would be able to query those data and then add those, immediately to an investigative sort of procedure where you look at it and say, oh yeah, I haven't seen this one before. This is something we need to really get eyes on, or, it gets added to an inventory of some sort. I think, for a place like Sitka, for instance, and Jackie can attest to this, that, after certain storms, there's a tremendous number of debris flows that come down those steep mountain fronts. And in 2015, one of those storms came through, obviously, and caused some devastating effects in part of the community where 3 people died. But elsewhere, there was tens of debris flows that were around the different fjords. And, people out in their boats could have recorded those easy enough and would have made it, the scientific community aware of those. And then more recently in Haines, it was actually used in an ad hoc manner for people to record any sort of landslide type features that they were discovering in the different areas. And so it really did prove its worth in that instance, though it wasn't categorized or anything at that point. So it was sort of all kinds of stuff were coming in. And so it clearly needs to be an organized, developed observation tool set for it to be useful. But I think, that's where it is right now. It's in the development queue, and we have a small amount of money to get that going. And I think it'll be a really good kind of baseline attempt at having this app. And then what I hope to do is get some feedback from those of you online and others to really, try to have the most salient and basic selection types within that tool to make it both usable, but also simple for the user to be able to record. And then, then we can develop it further as we get more funding.
And with the database that these are fed into, so I guess it must have basically, so people can include, I think that's true for the snow version of the app too, where you can include photos, right, as part of that.
Yeah, that's right. And so part of the kind of, I guess, additional expense later on is developing an API that would allow other people to access this and query the results and bring it in for better use, I guess, for however they want to use it. And so that's fine. That can all be developed a little bit more later on. I think initially it's just getting this tool set out there and having it available on Mountain Hub so that those photos and whatnot can be developed. And we have an API through Mountain Hub. It's just developing that other side of it that will probably, be within the month's time frame once we get a little bit more funding. And
so like an individual item in the database is like, it has a photo, it has like some categorical variables, and I imagine you could have just like a free-form description in there. Is that kind of what a row in the database looks like?
Yeah, so at its basic level, it would be an observation, coordinates, and whatever fields that are filled out within a pre-developed sort of selection tool. The user can put in notes. We have that for many of the other observation types. There's also an opportunity for measurement, but we can develop that as we want. But I think with landslide type, it's going to be fairly basic. Probably the most important thing is that a community observer can contribute by simply identifying it. And so probably the most important aspects of this would be a photograph, the coordinates, and then any notes that would be relevant to the landslide. And then that can be further developed by the scientist at some point.
Yeah, no, I think that could provide a lot of value. And there's, you want some categorical variables to separate like landslides from tension cracks, for instance, but really I don't see a lot of stuff that needs to be super highly structured.
Yeah, so that's where I see, that's where I see all of you coming into play. So once we get to the point where we are developing the different variables within this observation tool set, then we can come up with some ideas. So for instance, description, tension crack, landslide, rockfall, avalanche. I don't think we want to go too far in that direction because the people who are using this app are not trained scientists, right? So the fact that they're identifying a unstable slope for us, one that's either a incipient landslide or one that has occurred in such cases, debris flow in Haynes or Sitka, then I think that's the power of the tools, that somebody's identifying and locating those for us. But to provide the statistics or any sort of categorical observations that would require a trained eye, we want to avoid. And I think we can use it as a learning tool to some extent, describe various features in certain ways. So we can discuss that, of course, but I think it's up to development. But one thing that we've learned through the process of having an app where community observations are made is the simpler the better, really.
There's questions in the chat, Tig.
Yeah, or I was just seeing that Jackie raised her hand. Do you want to go ahead and speak up?
Yeah, no, Gabe, thank you very much. I think that a tool where people can record observations is great. We've had other landslides or storms that have initiated landslides in the greater Southeast area, and to have one place where people can go and record that is great, even if it's just I was camping and on my boat ride home, this landslide wasn't there. You know, and they're pretty easy to see in Southeast because it's forested, and all of a sudden something that was forested is now bare. It's very striking. So it's really easy to identify that. So it may be worth regionalizing this to differentiate like the types of features. Like it's pretty easy to see a new scar on a forested landscape. And I agree that it's probably harder to identify a tension crack if you're not familiar with what you're seeing. But right now, how people are figuring out if there's landslides have occurred in remote areas where there's few people is they'll post pictures on Facebook, which is not a good way to do that. So if there was just one place for people to report their observations, and that so scientists can have access to that, or people who want to investigate further or compile information, I think that would be really, really helpful. So I appreciate all the efforts in that, moving in that direction.
Yeah, it might be that that document that I showed when I started sharing screen there. If I'll be able to experiment with that some this summer, and then maybe it can provide the start of kind of a supporting document that would be for potential users of this app. Milan?
Yeah, that sounds. I love this idea, Hig. One thing that I saw or sort of came to mind when I was looking through the document that you showed is that just kind of like active rockfall might also be something to look for, like, you know, raveling kind of active motion in places where maybe it's not typical, or people haven't observed it before, or they just happen to see a little rockfall or something. That would be another thing that you could add to your list of things. And I am really intrigued by sort of the whole app idea. And I've talked to some of you about this project that I want to start and have funding to start to build kind of a larger database of really cryospheric hazards. So that there's going to be some muddiness and fuzziness around kind of differentiating, okay, what is that, but really looking at anything that's glacier retreat related, permafrost related. And there's all of these small events that are never worth really investigating on their own, that never warrant a whole paper. You know, obviously something like what just happened in India gets a huge amount of attention, and, you know, everybody jumps on it and we really investigate it in depth, but there's a ton of stuff out there, like some of the things I think Hig and we've talked about, these, you know, in the Chugach or whatnot, these rock avalanches that descend onto glaciers and stuff that you've mapped a bunch of, that on their own don't often lead to a lot of investigation, but I think are really important data points. And so I'm hoping to build kind of a bucket, a framework where we can collect all of these observations to really try to understand how things are changing globally. And so I think it'll be really interesting for me to potentially mine some of the stuff that's being reported by people out there. And could potentially also be interesting to think about whether Mountain Hub can be used in other places as well for collecting observations. I'm sure if you went to the European Alps or places where lots of people are out and about, you would get a lot of small events, especially, which don't often get recorded.
Yeah, so I think that possibility is there, Milan. You know, Mountain Hub came to us after it was a backcountry, adventure app that we solicited the company's assistance with on a NASA-funded snow science project back in 2016, 2017. And then after a while, the app was gifted to us after it went to Mammut and
nice.
then to us. And so the app itself is really something that I've wanted to have developed for quite some time, not only for snow science, which we use it principally for. And so it's been optimized for that in the last year that we've had it, or less than a year, like 7-8 months now, where we've now taken it from a recreation-based app to something that's optimized a little bit more, which gives the user a little bit more ability to control the fixed time for GPS and the accuracies for those sorts of things. And then developing it for other scientific objectives. For instance, we're developing it now for a forest fire project.
Nice.
There is this idea of landslides that I've put forward with a small amount of funding we have to at least get that initiated. But I think, it has a global reach right now, the way it is. And there's a huge backcountry following of, around 30,000 users or so around the world who are principally involved in recreation-based use of the app. But I think bringing a large portion of that existing group into kind of a science-based observation kind of mindset, but also bringing in other people who want to record these things. And one thing that always struck me with this as being really important is putting this in the hands of Alaska pilots, because I get phone calls and emails from pilots all the time. And if we could just give them a tool, instead of them describing to me as they're, landing somewhere that, where it is, and I'm trying to scour Google Earth to find out what it is, they can actually place it. And they have such an intimate knowledge of the landscape. And they're always recognizing things. And most of the large landslides that we find out about come from pilots first, and then from the geotechnical people around the world, probably. And so I think this could be a really useful tool for that in particular, is for just having it in the hands of pilots that they can help us start identifying things that we're clearly missing.
Right. One question on that, Gabe, was this a Mammut North America thing or Mammut global, like from the Swiss headquarters?
Yeah, it was originally, well, it's a global thing. So the donation was directly from the Swiss headquarters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barrett makes a good point in the chat. Is we want to be, in some of these cases, something like Barry Arm. We don't really want to encourage people to go walk around on the instabilities of Barry Arm, because it's pretty dangerous. So I think in a lot of cases that it's quite reasonable to, a lot of the, if I think about like Alpine Ridge or these ridges around Seward, I don't feel like we'd be putting people in a lot of danger to go take a few notes on them. But there are some where that would be, you'd want to red flag those at some level, not directly encourage people to go those places. Aaron Balick, I wonder if I'm curious what your thoughts are from a Valdez perspective, if you're still on. Do you think that there's a community there that would engage in this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think there's actually a huge one. I'm glad you asked, because I was typing it in the chat, so it'll save my fingers. But I can see some of those that have already been mentioned. Our heli ski, our heli tours. We're constantly running heli tours all summer long that are flying these mountain ranges, as well as even the commercial fishing and charter fishing vessels that are out and getting in some of these obscure areas of the sound that may not have a lot of eyes on the slopes. And as well as my recent thought was the guided goat hunts. We have a number of hunters and guide services here that are on the tops of these peaks frequently and know them, as well as backcountry skiers and other recreationists. And yeah, there's a big population. If I think about it for just a few minutes, I could probably come up with 2 or 3 times that amount. But I think it's a fantastic idea. So one of the things I threw in the chat was I was just curious what type of funding Dr. Wolken would be needed to expand the app to do that. if you have an idea.
That's a really good question. It's actually it depends on what needs to be done, and so it's not an easy question to answer right now. It really just depends on what needs to be done, what expansion is possible given the current framework of the app, and if the app is currently in its current form capable of supporting these different new tool sets, then it's actually fairly reasonable to do this. The biggest issue is just finding developer time to work on it. But a few $10,000s could get the app in really great working condition for this specific project. But even much less than that is what's required just to get it on the next version of the app update release, so that we can at least get it in the hands of people and start making observations.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. The city committed to participate in this group, and I would hope that commitment would be more than just attending a Zoom meeting, and that we would be actually doing some things tangible and or financial if possible. So I will do some investigations and find out what we might have available, because we have a lot of slopes in this area that affect the citizens of Valdez, right in town and just out of town. And so I'll do some digging.
Yeah, that sounds great, Aaron. Thanks very much for that. And Valdez has been super supportive of the work that we've been doing on Valdez Glacier and Valdez Glacier Lake, and as well as with the snow science. And so, you guys have a lot of active and involved people in that community, and a really good city council that likes to get involved in these types of projects. So just let me know if I can help that out in any way.
Yeah, the ridge just directly north of I don't know if it's called Shoup Lake or Shoup Lagoon, the water body closest to Shoup Glacier there. There's some instabilities up there that I think they're all failing to the north, which is better because they go onto the glacier if that happens. But anyway, that's one spot that just looking at satellite imagery, there's probably some things worth looking at up there.
I wonder, Gabe, is this something that could also be put into like outreach portions of grants?
Did you say outreach portions?
Yeah, like grant proposals that have kind of an outreach part. This seems like funding if funding is, the main thing that's needed, it seems like that's something to keep in mind for any kind of pots of money that we might come across.
Yeah, absolutely. So we funded it. Well, it's being funded principally by our NASA grants right now, and then we're bringing in some other funds as needed. The biggest cost to this is keeping the app functioning. So the sustained, use of the app over time is the expensive part. And so putting it into grants as just one of those outreach items or a particular service category is completely appropriate. And what that does is it pays for all the background services that are needed to keep an app going. It's essentially we have it leaned down quite a bit right now, but I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, but it's like $1,000 per month just to keep it background services going, let alone any development costs.
Gabe, this is Ben. You mentioned NASA. Are you coordinating with the NASA landslides folks on the report a landslide app they have, or this is a separate effort?
No, this is completely separate. So this all came about from our community snow observations project. And so it's, we were partnering with Mountain Hub initially. And then, like I said, last summer, we acquired the app and have been using it now. for various other purposes, but it's principally supported by community snow observations, which was funded by NASA.
Okay, yeah. Are you aware of the NASA landslide reporter?
I am. Yep.
Okay. Good. Yeah. The USGS tried something like this a while ago, kind of akin to the "Did you feel it?" It was called "Did you see it?" for reporting a landslide, but I think the community was not as engaged as folks in Alaska. We didn't really get that many reports, and also the kind of trade-off between the data we were getting and the management costs that you kind of referred to weren't adding up. But I think it
Sure.
sounds like you've got a more encouraging platform, and maybe just kind of better timing and use of smartphones and things like that. So I think that's great.
I think that could be. It's also the idea that we've inherited an app that was already functioning as a recreation-based share your adventure sort of app. And in doing so, we already had a group of people who were interested in being in the backcountry and being aware of their surroundings. And a lot of these people just found it, useful to, share their snow observations, which was the whole point of our involvement initially. And, both for sharing kind of the snow distribution around the areas so that we could develop better models and validate snow remote sensing tools, but also to share with their friends. And I think that's kind of the other part of this that makes it valuable. And it's not just asking people to go out and do science, it's asking people who are already out there to contribute in some way. And I think that's what makes it useful and probably a little bit more powerful to have that backing already in place.
Yeah, the kind of member recruitment's already taken care of, and it's the right people, not someone just finding a landslide and wanting to know what to do about it, but kind of already in this reporting and sharing mode. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think with members of communities here on this call and like the engagement we have in Alaska, that's a really promising starting point for getting getting some really useful data. I was thinking a little bit about Milen's a more global kind of perspective on getting data, and one thing that would be fantastic, but it's much more difficult outreach task, but would be to connect with people who happen to get these incredible videos of landslides. Because I mean, in that document, I put a link to a few useful ones at the bottom, useful videos. And for example, there's one from New Zealand where someone actually documented this rocky, basically it's a little thin glacier and then rock mass that failed. They were somewhere very close to the source, and they follow it all the way down into the runout. It's an incredible video. But you're, at least in my experience, I'm always finding these on YouTube. They're often, you can't find much about the original source. In that case, actually, there may be some original source information and you could actually get in touch with a person. But it'd be so great to have supporting information that was accurate with those, have it really, kind of preserved for scientific purposes rather than becoming, part of 20 horrendous landslides around the world, like often mislabeled and kind of misleading in how they're presented on YouTube. So that would be, a challenging thing to really connect with. But even if there were a few really well documented eyewitness videos, these kind of 1 in a million chance videos that people get, then that could be a valuable thing as well. Just go for it, Anna.
Yeah, I'm curious. When we got Gabe here and Barrett and USGS and DGS, if there's anything you guys have to share in regards to this summer and efforts that will be done in the field or monitoring.
Yeah, we have a cooperative agreement with USGS that is hopefully going to be in place so that we can all do field work sometime in the snow-free period. And that timeline's not really known right now, but I think we're looking at maybe end of June or early July, where there's going to be some people going out in the field to install equipment if the permitting comes through as well. And the idea would be to put out some weather station equipment, some permafrost monitoring sensors, ground-based radar interferometer, and generally get out there and get some boots on the ground, I think.
Also note that we have planned, and Gabe's working also with Anya Dufresne and I will be out at Gruink this year. Pretty certain. Pandemic is still a question, but that we're talking about the first half of September for field work. And I think if we get really good weather, then maybe we'll be able to have enough time with Anya and Florian and their time in Alaska to go and visit some other sites as well. So I don't know whether that will come together or not, but it'll be good to have them up here looking at some of these sites. Any other thoughts or comments on the role of citizen science and where we might go with apps and community outreach, this sort of thing? Hearing none, I had two just quick notes, landslide related notes. One is that I pulled up a recent Sentinel image of Barry Arm area, and it looks like there might have been another big rockfall that swept across the middle of the landslide mass. There's a snow-free stripe right through the middle. I'm curious, do we have? Does anyone know if we have seismic feed yet, or is that still out for snowpack?
Yeah, as far as I know. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that only one is transmitting intermittently, and we're waiting on the snowpack to dissipate to see if it will be damaged and need further repair. But they're hoping that they'll both come online as the snow disappears. So it may have been recorded, but I'm not sure.
Be interesting to look at the infrasound record too. I should. I don't. Is anyone involved with the infrasound online right now? Yeah, I'll drop them an email. And I wanted to just highlight one other thing. I'll go ahead and share my screen again because it's pretty well lined up right here. But in looking in the Seward area, I've come across several areas of talus slope where you'll see these sorts of features on the talus slope. And this image, let's see how it looks on the other. Yeah, it's not going to even load. But I'm pretty convinced that they are some sort of bulk deformation feature. They're little scarps or tension cracks, although it's conceivable they're something like a avalanche shove or something like that. They're in talus slopes, and I found over a dozen sites right around Seward. And I haven't, which is probably, my own inconsistent surveying, but I haven't found sites anywhere else in Alaska. And after finding these, I did go at least to my own area where I know the backcountry fairly well to look for similar features, and couldn't find any. They're pretty confusing to me. Like at first I thought maybe, so if you look at like this one here, that's a really nice, looks like an arcuate head scarp there, or tension crack. At first I thought, is this something related to buried ice? But I don't think so. My best guess is that these are talus slopes that have enough, enough fines in them that during extreme rain events, they can actually start mobilizing. There's one actual landslide scar right here. That's the best analog I've found for what maybe these would, if they did fail catastrophically, what that might look like. This is a couple decades old at least. But I'm curious if anyone's seen that kind of tension cracking in talus slopes before. It was a new one to me when I stumbled across them.
I've seen these from the air, but I don't have any ground experience with these. And it seems to me that talus slopes are, incredibly active places, and any sort of surface expression is really rapidly erased. But with something like this, and this is the only place I've seen it, is in the alpine regions in this state, is that it might be, something akin to a temporary gelifluction lobe, or some sort of, early spring solifluction, gelifluction sort of feature that quickly goes away. And that's the only time I've seen them is in early spring, but maybe others have had different observations.
I have been able to see features that are persistent for years that are like this. I mean, I agree that, talus slope, if you wait some decades, presumably, if it's an active talus slope, they should be buried if they're not active. But I think they're more persistent than like a, just related to melt out kind of feature. Anyway, an interesting one. I was surprised when I came across them.
Well, oh, hi, Hick. Let me just jump in quickly. Well, like a solifluction lobe, those things will persist for years and years, and it's just material that's just very slowly kind of migrating downslope. And so I haven't really heard of those. Like, you see them all the time in areas with permafrost, or like a permafrost feature. I've never heard of them causing like a failure, but it could be possible in a place like this. But yeah, that's what they look like to me.
Yeah, the solifluction. I know what you're referring to now. I think of those as being basically active layer features, and so they're kind of limited in scale because they aren't that deep. So, like, looking at the spacing of these, I don't know. Anyway, this is different than what I've seen there, but maybe that is a good direction to think about there. Oh, interesting. Thank you guys for your thoughts. Any last thoughts? Thoughts? We got about 5 minutes here. Anything else that anyone wants to share, or proposals for the next meeting?
Caleb, I'm curious if you received any comments and feedback from the letter that was sent out, which we sent to community members and gave sort of an overview of what has been done towards the Berry Arm specifically last year.
Yeah, we haven't really received any direct feedback. We have an idea of kind of what our distribution was originally and who got to read it. But we haven't really honestly received any specific feedback from the letter. But I still think it was a worthy effort to get it out. And I think it's not necessarily, didn't necessarily include that call to action that was specific, like get back to us with ABC. I think it was kind of almost like a preparation for the next step.
I had a thought about next meeting, and I see Ronnie's still on here. I was wondering if, and thinking about Milan and cryospheric hazards, is that maybe talking a little bit about what what are the research needs and questions that relate to more. I'm thinking about more the sort of landslides that are happening in interior Alaska, everything from the frozen debris lobes to there's some that seem more like earth flow kind of events, and then there are these Mallardy high velocity landslides. But I've been really surprised at how abundant they seem to be in the interior. There's some interesting like valley blocking events that have happened in recent years and such too. And I'd be curious to hear kind of where people are going. Maybe Melissa would have some contributions there too. But does that seem like that might be a good topic to to chew on for an hour in a month or so.
This would be the June meeting.
Mhm.
Great, I will be back at a computer then.
Ronnie, would you be able to present a little bit at something like that? Maybe we're just getting maybe Ronnie's not there right now. All right. Well, I'll put that suggestion out and see whether that there seems to be traction there. But I'd be happy to kind of compile a few sites that you know, sort of intrigued me around the state as far as permafrosty, mostly low mountain kind of interior landslides. Any final thoughts? Well, thank you everyone
for organizing again.
What was that?
Thank you for organizing again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone. We'll talk to you
Talk to you soon.
later.